The Antiquities of the Jews, Volume 4, by Flavius Josephus, Book 17, Chapters 11 through 13. Chapter 11. An Embassage to Cæsar, and how Cæsar confirmed Herod's testament. So when Varus had settled these affairs, and had placed the former legion at Jerusalem, he returned back to Antioch. But as for Archelaus, he had had new sources of trouble come upon him at Rome, on the occasions following. For an embassage of the Jews was come to Rome, Varus having permitted the nation to send it, that they might petition for the liberty of living by their own laws. Now the number of the ambassadors that were sent by the authority of the nation were 50, to which they joined above 8,000 of the Jews that were at Rome already. Hereupon Cæsar assembled his friends and the chief men among the Romans in the temple of Apollo, which he had built at a vast charge, whither the ambassadors came, and a multitude of them that were there already came with them, as did also Archelaus and his friends. But as for the several kinsmen which Archelaus had, they would not join themselves with him out of their hatred to him, and yet they thought it too gross a thing for them to assist the ambassadors against him, as supposing it would be a disgrace to them in Cæsar's opinion to think thus of enacting an opposition to a man of their own kindred. Philip also was come hither out of Syria, by the persuasion of Varus, with this principal intention to assist his brother Archelaus, for Varus was his great friend, but still so, that if there should any change happen in the form of government, which Varus suspected there would, and if any distribution should be made on account of the number that desired the liberty of living by their own laws, that he might not be disappointed, but might have his share in it. Now upon the liberty that was given to the Jewish ambassadors to speak, they who hoped to obtain a dissolution of kingly government betook themselves to accuse Herod of his iniquities. And they declared that he was indeed in name a king, but that he had taken to himself that uncontrollable authority which tyrants exercise over their subjects, and had made use of that authority for the destruction of the Jews, and did not abstain from making many innovations among them besides, according to his own inclinations, and that whereas there were a great many who perished by that destruction he brought upon them, so many indeed as no other history relates, they that survived were far more miserable than those that suffered under him, not only by the anxiety they were in from his looks and disposition towards them, but from the danger their estates were in of being taken away by him, that he did never leave off adorning these cities that lay in their neighborhood, but were inhabited by foreigners, but so that the cities belonging to his own government were ruined and utterly destroyed, that whereas when he took the kingdom it was in an extraordinary flourishing condition, he had filled the nation with the utmost degree of poverty, and when upon unjust pretenses he had slain any of the nobility, he took away their estates, and when he permitted any of them to live, he condemned them to the forfeiture of what they possessed. And besides the annual impositions which he had laid upon every one of them, they were to make liberal presents to himself, to his domestics and friends, and to such of his slaves as were vouchsafed the favor of being his tax gatherers, because there was no way of obtaining a freedom from an unjust violence without giving either gold or silver for it. That they would say nothing of the corruption of the chastity of their virgins, and the reproach laid on their wives for incontinency, and those things acted after an insolent and inhuman manner, because it was not a smaller pleasure to the sufferers to have such things concealed than it would have been not to have suffered them. That Herod had put such abuses upon them as a wild beast would not have put on them, if he had power given to him to rule over us. And that although their nation had passed through many subversions and alterations of government, their history gave no account of any calamity they had ever been under that could be compared with this which Herod had brought upon their nation. That it was for this reason that they thought they might justly and gladly salute Archelaus as king, upon this supposition, that whosoever should be set over their kingdom, he would appear more mild to them than Herod had been; and that they had joined with him in the mourning for his father, in order to gratify him, and were ready to oblige him in other points also, if they could meet with any degree of moderation from him, but that he seemed to be afraid lest he should not be deemed Herod's own son, and so, without any delay, he immediately let the nation understand his meaning. And this before his dominion was well established, since it belonged to Cæsar, who could either give it to him or not, as he pleased, that he had given a specimen of his future virtue to his subjects, and that with what kind of moderation and good administration he would govern them, by that his first action, which concerned them, his own citizens, and God himself also, when he had made the slaughter of 3,000 of his own countrymen at the temple. How then could they avoid the just hatred of him, who to the rest of his barbarity hath added this as one of our crimes, that we have opposed and contradicted him in the exercise of his authority? Now the main thing they desired was this, that they might be delivered from the kingly and the like forms of government, and might be added to Syria, and be put under the authority of such presidents of theirs as should be sent to them, for that it would thereby be made evident whether they be really a seditious people, and generally fond of innovations, or whether they would live in an orderly manner, that they might have governors over them. Now when the Jews had said this, Nicolaus vindicated the kings from those accusations, and said that as for Herod, since he had never been thus accused all the time of his life, it was not fit for those who might have accused him of lesser crimes than those now mentioned, and might have procured him to be punished during his lifetime, to bring an accusation against him now that he is dead. He also attributed the actions of Archelaus to the Jews' injuries to him, who, affecting to govern contrary to the laws, and going about to kill those that would have hindered them from acting unjustly, when they were by him punished for what they had done, made their complaints against him. So he accused them of their attempts for innovation, and of the pleasure they took in sedition, by reason of their not having learned to submit to justice and to the laws, but still desiring to be superior in all things. This was the substance of what Nicolaus said. When Cæsar had heard these pleadings, he dissolved the assembly. But a few days afterwards he appointed Archelaus, not indeed to be king of the whole country, but ethnarch of the one half of that which had been subject to Herod, and promised to give him the royal dignity hereafter, if he governed his part virtuously. But as for the other half, he divided it into 2 parts, and gave it to 2 other of Herod's sons, to Philip and to Antipas, that Antipas who disputed with Archelaus for the whole kingdom. Now to him it was that Paris and Galilee paid their tribute, which amounted annually to 200 talents, while Batanea with Trachonitis, as well as Orianitis, with a certain part of what was called the house of Zenodorus, paid the tribute of 100 talents to Philip. But Idumea and Judea, and the country of Samaria, paid tribute to Archelaus, but had now a 4th part of that tribute taken off by the order of Cæsar, who decreed them that mitigation, because they did not join this revolt with the rest of the multitude. There were also certain of the cities which paid tribute to Archelaus, Strato's Tower, and Sebaste, cities which paid tribute to Archelaus, Strato's Tower, and Sebaste, with Joppa and Jerusalem. As for Gaza, and Gadara, and Hippos, they were Grecian cities, which Cæsar separated from his government, and added them to the province of Syria. Now the tribute money that came to Archelaus every year from his own dominions amounted to 600 talents. And so much came to Herod's sons from their father's inheritance. But Salome, besides what her brother left her by his testament, which were Jamnia, and Ashdod, and Phasaelis, and 500,000 drachmae of coined silver, Cæsar made her a present of a royal habitation at Askelo. In all, her revenues amounted to 60 talents by the year, and her dwelling house, which was in Archelaus' government. The rest also of the king's relations received what his testament allotted them. Moreover, Cæsar made a present to each of Herod's 2 virgin daughters, besides what their father left them, of 250,000 drachmae, and married them to Pheroras's sons. He also granted all that was bequeathed to himself to the king's sons, which was 1,500 talents, excepting a few of the vessels, which he reserved for himself. And they were acceptable to him, not so much for the great value they were of, as because they were memorials of the king to him. Chapter 12. Concerning a Spurious Alexander. When these affairs had thus been settled by Cæsar, a certain young man, by birth a Jew, but brought up by a Roman freedman in the city of Zidon, engrafted himself to the kindred of Herod, by the resemblance of his countenance, which those that saw him attested to be that of Alexander the son of Herod, whom he had slain. And this was an incitement to him to endeavor to obtain the government. So he took to him as an assistant a man of his own country, one that was well acquainted with the affairs of the palace, but on other accounts an ill man, and one whose nature made him capable of causing great disturbances to the public, and one that became a teacher of such a mischievous contrivance to be Alexander the son of Herod, but stolen away by one of those that were sent to slay him, who in reality slew other men, in order to deceive the spectators, but saved both him and his brother Aristobulus. Thus was this man elated, and able to impose on those that came to him. And when he was come to Crete, he made all of the Jews that came to discourse with him believe him to be Alexander. And when he had gotten much money which had been presented to him there, he passed over to Melos, where he got much more money than he had before, out of the belief they had that he was of the royal family, and their hopes that he would recover his father's principality, and reward his benefactors. So he made haste to Rome, and was conducted thither by those strangers who entertained him. He was also so fortunate as upon his landing at Dicearchia to bring the Jews that were there to the same delusion, and not only other people, but also those who had been great with Herod, or had a kindness for him, joined themselves to this man as their king. The cause of it was this, that men were glad of his pretenses, which were seconded by the likeness of his countenance, which made those that had been acquainted with Alexander strongly to believe that he was no other but the very same person, which they had also confirmed to others by oath; insomuch that when the report went about him coming to Rome, the whole multitude of the Jews that were there went out to meet him, ascribing it to divine providence that he was so unexpectedly escaped, and being joyful on account of his mother's family. And when he was come, he was carried in a royal litter through the streets, and all the ornaments about him were such as kings were adorned withal. And this was at the expense of those that entertained him. The multitude also flocked about him greatly, and made mighty acclamations to him, and nothing was omitted which would be thought suitable to such as had been so unexpectedly preserved. When this thing was told Cæsar, he did not believe. Herod was not easily to be imposed upon in such affairs as were of great concern to him. Yet, having some suspicion it might be so, he sent one Celadus, a freedman of his, and one that had conversed with the young men themselves, and bade him to bring Alexander into his presence. So he brought him, being no more accurate in judging about him than the rest of the multitude. Yet did not he deceive Cæsar, for although there was a resemblance between him and Alexander, yet it was not so exact as to impose on such as were prudent and discerning. For this Spurious Alexander had his hands rough, by the labors he had been put to, and instead of that softness of body which the other had, and this as derived from his delicate and generous education. This man, for the contrary reason, had a rugged body. When therefore Cæsar saw how the master and the scholar agreed in this lying story, and in a bold way of talking, he inquired about Astrobulus, and asked what became of him who, it seems, was stolen together with him, and for what reason it was that he did not come along with him, and endeavor to recover that dominion which was due his high birth also. And when he said that he had been left in the isle of Crete for fear of the dangers of the sea, that, in case any accident should come to himself, the posterity of Mariamne would not utterly perish, but that Astrobulus might survive and punish those that laid such treacherous designs against them. And when he persevered in his affirmations, and the author of the imposture agreed in supporting it, Cæsar took the young man by himself, and said to him, If thou wilt not impose upon me, thou shalt have this for thy reward, that thou shalt escape with thy life. Tell me then who thou art, and who it was that had this boldness enough to contrive such a cheat as this, for this contrivance is too considerable a piece of villainy to be undertaken by one of thy age. Accordingly, because he had no other way to take, he told Cæsar the contrivance, and after that manner, and by whom it was laid together. So Cæsar, upon observing the spurious Alexander to be a strong active man, and fit to work with his hands, that he might not break his promise to him, put him among those that were to row among the mariners, but slew him that induced him to do what he had done. For as for the people of Melos, he thought them sufficiently punished in having thrown away so much of their money upon this spurious Alexander. And such was the ignominious conclusion of this bold contrivance about the spurious Alexander. Chapter 13. How Archelaus, upon a second accusation, was banished to Vienna. When Archelaus was entered on his ethnarchy, and was come to Judea, he accused Eleazar, the son of Boethus, of assisting the seditious, and took away the high priesthood from him, and put Eleazar his brother in his place. He also magnificently rebuilt the royal palace that had been at Jericho, and he diverted half the water with which the village of Neara used to be watered, and drew off that water to water those palm trees which he had there planted. He also built a village, and put his own name on it, and called it Archelaus. Moreover, he transgressed the law of our fathers, and married Glaphyra, the daughter of Archelaus, who had been the wife of his brother Alexander, which Alexander had 3 children by her, while it was a thing detestable among the Jews to marry the brother's wife. Nor did this Eleazar abide long in the high priesthood, Jesus, the son of Zia, being put in his room while he was still living. But in the 10th year of Archelaus' government, both his brethren and the principal men of Judea and Samaria, not being able to bear his barbarous and tyrannical usage of them, accused him before Cæsar, and especially because they knew he had broken the commands of Cæsar, which obliged him to behave himself with moderation among them. Whereupon Cæsar, when he heard it, was very angry, and called for Archelaus' steward, who took care of his affairs at Rome, and whose name was Archelaus also. And thinking it beneath him to write to Archelaus, he bid him to sail away as soon as possible, bring him to us. So the man made haste in his voyage, and when he came to Judea, he found Archelaus feasting with his friends. So he told him what Cæsar had sent him about, and hastened him away. And when he was come to Rome, Cæsar, upon hearing what certain accusers of his had to say, and what reply he could make, both banished him, and appointed Vienna, a city of Gaul, to be the place of his habitation, and took his money away from him. Now before Archelaus was gone up to Rome upon this message, he related this dream to his friends, that he saw ears of corn in number 10, full of wheat, perfectly ripe, which ears, as it seemed to him, were devoured by oxen. And when he was awake and had gotten up, because the vision appeared to be of great importance to him, he sent for the diviners, whose study was employed about dreams. And while some were of one opinion, and some of another, for all their interpretations did not agree, Simon, a man of the sect of Essens, desired leave to speak his mind freely, and said that the vision denoted a change in the affairs of Archelaus, and that not for the better; that oxen, because that animal takes uneasy pains in its labors, denoted afflictions, and indeed denoted further a change of affairs, because that land which is plowed by oxen cannot remain in its former state; and that the ears of corn being 10 determined the like number of years, because an ear of corn grows in 1 year; and that the time of Archelaus' government was over. And thus did this man expound the dream. Now on the 5th day after this dream came first to Archelaus. The other Archelaus, that was sent to Judea by Cæsar, to call him away, came hither also. The like incident befell Glaphyra his wife, who was the daughter of king Archelaus, who, as I said before, was married, while she was a virgin, to Alexander the son of Herod, and the brother of Archelaus. But since it fell out so that Alexander was slain by his father, she was married to Juba, the king of Libya. And when he was dead, she lived in widowhood in Cappadocia with her father. Archelaus divorced his former wife, Mariamne, and married her, so great was his affection for this Glaphyra, who during her marriage to him saw the following dream. She thought she saw Alexander standing by her, at which she rejoiced, and embraced him with great affection, but that he complained to her, and said, O Glaphyra, thou provest that saying to be true, which assures us that women are not to be trusted. Didst thou not pledge thy faith to me? And wast thou not married to me when thou wast a virgin? And had we not children between us? Yet hast thou forgotten the affection I bare to thee, out of a desire of a second husband. Nor hast thou been satisfied with that injury thou didst me, but thou hast been so bold as to procure thee a third husband to lie by thee, and in an indecent and imprudent manner hast entered into my house, and hast been married to our brother. However, I will not forget thy former kind affection for me, but will set thee free from every such reproachful action, and cause thee to be mine again, as thou once was. When she related this to her female companions, in a few days' time she departed this life. Now I did not think these histories improper for the present discourse, both because my discourse is now concerning kings, and otherwise also on account of the advantage hence to be drawn, as well as for the confirmation of the immortality of the soul, as of the providence of God over human affairs. I thought them fit to be set down. But if any one does not believe such relations, let him indeed enjoy his own opinion, but let him not hinder another that would thereby encourage himself in virtue. So Archelaus's country was laid to the province of Syria, and Cyrenius, one that had been consul, was sent by Cæsar to take account of people's effects in Syria, and to sell the house of Archelaus. End of Book 17, chapters 11 through 13. End of Book 17.